Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Soul Land 2 Peerless Tang Men based on novel. So let's start. The next morning. A refreshingly chilly, light mist filled the air. Hui Yuhao had changed his attire. His current ordinary attire made him seem like an ordinary kid. The sun had already risen halfway in the east. He'd also finished cultivating his purple demon eyes. He'd made the quickest progress in the purple demon eyes among all of the Tang sect's secret techniques. There were 4 different levels of the purple demon eyes: surveillance, totality, mustard seed, and boundlessness. He was already at the 3rd level, mustard seed. He'd managed to reach this level using his spiritual detection to research the ability to focus. He was also the first to reach the mustard seed level among everyone in the Tang sect. Even Shrek Academy's senior management didn't know that Hui Yuhao's greatest offensive strength didn't lie in his ultimate ice or dark golden terraclaw. Rather, it was his immense spiritual power that could be used through the combination of his purple demon eyes and spiritual shock. His irresistible spiritual power was the reason why he could fight beyond his level. In the distance, 2 graceful-looking figures drifted into view. They were walking very quickly, and reached Hui Yuhao quite quickly. Juzi had changed into a white dress which accentuated her figure. Her silky white skin looked much brighter, as it was complemented by her white attire. Cuckoo was dressed in green, and looked very neat. Although her figure wasn't as good as Juzi's, it was still very proportionate, her dress making her look more vibrant. The 2 of them weren't kind when they saw Hui Yuhao. Cuckoo placed her hands on her waist and said, "It's all your fault that we have to go out again. Teacher Xian said that you have to listen to the both of us when we're out. If you dare to try anything, the academy will expel you and immediately send you back to Shrek Academy." Hui Yuhao was a little annoyed, thus he shrugged his shoulders. He simply gestured for them to advance, but didn't say anything. Juzi glanced at him and said, "Let's go. We're heading to the Jingyang mountain range. There are many soul beasts there. We should forget our conflict back in the academy and work together on this journey. You're the only male here, thus you should protect us well." Hui Yuhao was a little stunned as he looked at Juzi. He hadn't expected her temperament to change so much. He nodded and said, "Okay." Cuckoo was annoyed after hearing Hui Yuhao's short reply and said, "Hey, you're taking this attitude even though Sister Juzi is being so nice to you." Hui Yuhao laughed bitterly. "Am I supposed to be grateful? The 2 of you were bullying me just yesterday." Cuckoo's glare grew even wider. It was as if she'd just heard something ridiculous. "We bullied you? Wang Xiaojie is still unconscious, while Zimu's injury is still quite serious. Who bullied who?" Hui Yuhao answered, "I was just defending myself. Could you take it if someone calls you a bastard?" After flying for 2 hours, Hui Yuhao expressed that he needed to rest. Afterwards, he flew downwards, disregarding the other 2's opinions. He still had some soul power left, but he wouldn't deplete it all. He found a suitable place to rest as he descended. Once he landed, he immediately sat cross-legged and entered a meditative state to restore his soul power. Juzi and Cuckoo landed after him. Cuckoo stuck out her tongue at Hui Yuhao. Wasn't he arrogant before? His soul engineer standard is just average. He can't be arrogant anymore, can he? Sister Juzi, you're right. With enough distance between us, this fellow wouldn't be our match. Juzi didn't say anything, simply watching Hui Yuhao. She appeared to be thinking of something. She was the only one out of the 4 yesterday that had seen the entire fight. Hui Yuhao left a deep impression on her, not because of his dark golden terror claws, but because of his punch towards Zimu's soul shield. Juzi had felt as if he was a king capable of ruling the world at that point in time. She'd seen the extremely wise, intelligent and powerful Zimu be unable to even handle his strike, and collapse after just 1 punch. She couldn't forget the golden light in Hui Yuhao's eyes and his dominant might. The horrible feeling she'd felt from being frozen by the domain of perpetual ice had been replaced by curiosity. How magical was this young fellow from Shrek Academy? She was only a student and didn't have the authority to investigate Hui Yuhao's background like Xian Ziwen. However, she clearly felt that he wasn't just some random 3-ringed soul master. There must be some secret to him. Shrek Academy was indeed mysterious. "All right, Cuckoo. We have to stick together since we're on the same trip. There are bound to be conflicts. If we meet danger and can't work together, won't we just be harming ourselves? Let's take a break too." Juzi pulled Cuckoo and sat down. They had more soul power than Hui Yuhao, and had depleted less of it too. However, Hui Yuhao's restoration left both of them shocked. It only took 15 minutes before he opened his eyes, looking refreshed. Cuckoo was stunned and asked, "Your soul power's already been restored?" She hadn't even seen Hui Yuhao using an auxiliary-type soul tool like the milk bottle. Hui Yuhao nodded and said, "We can leave now." As she spoke, she set up the grill and started a fire to prepare her food. Hui Yuhao was a little stunned as he watched. He had a weird feeling in his heart, because he was always the one who grilled meat for others. However, it was the reverse now, an entirely new experience for him. He didn't say much, and just watched quietly. "You're in luck. Sister Juzi's cooking is the best. Even Zimu and Wang Xiaojie rarely get to try it." After flying for 4 hours, Cuckoo seemed to have forgotten the conflict between her and Hui Yuhao. Although still as petty as ever, the contempt in her eyes had dissipated. "Ha ha." Hui Yuhao laughed even though he thought it seemed a little silly. Cuckoo snapped, "What are you laughing at?" "Oh right, what type of a soul engineer are you, type?" Hui Yuhao was a little puzzled as he looked at her. Cuckoo seemed as if she were looking at a freak and said, "That can't be right. Don't tell me that Shrek is so backwards that it doesn't categorize its soul engineers? Soul masters must tend towards a certain aspect. No soul engineers can excel in all areas, unless you're a research-type soul engineer like Teacher Xian, who puts research as his priority and is not inclined towards any certain aspect. You must be a close combat type of soul engineer, since your close combat skills are so honed. However, I haven't seen you use a close combat soul tool before." Boom! Hui Yuhao felt the illusion of something that had been confusing him for a long time instantly being blown to pieces in his brain. A light appeared in his head. All this while, he and He Kai-tu had been cultivating tirelessly because of the ultimate soldier plan. They practically tortured themselves every day. How couldn't he feel tired? Wasn't he human too? Even though his memory was shockingly good, and his spiritual power was superior to that of most others, he would still be fatigued when he tried to meditate at night. This was also why his mind became unstable when Elder Mu passed away. After digesting her words and recalling the huge cannon she'd brought at that time, Hui Yuhao vaguely understood what her direction was. Hui Yuhao sighed in his heart. Shrek Academy's Soul Tool Department didn't make any clear distinctions like this. Soul engineers were classified just like soul masters. He had to pass this news back quickly. His entire trip out here made worthwhile by this discovery. As he was thinking, a thick aroma wafted over. He and Cuckoo were attracted to it. "Wow, it's so fragrant." Cuckoo rushed towards Juzi. Her eyes brightened up. Surprisingly, her drooling face looked rather cute. Juzi's grilling technique was indeed amazing. The 2 pheasants she cooked turned a golden yellow from the grilling. Hui Yuhao's nose twitched, and he could immediately tell that Juzi had used more than 10 different types of spices on the grilled pheasants, and could tell her grilling method was slightly different from his. However, he could ascertain that the taste of the pheasants would be good from its aroma and crispy, golden yellow appearance. Juzi glanced at Cuckoo and laughed. "They always laugh at me for being a glutton, but you're not much different from me. It's just that you're good at hiding it." Cuckoo laughed. "I'll put up with anything you say now. Faster. I'm dying of hunger. As long as you feed me right this instant, I'll let you say anything." Juzi glared at her before glancing at Hui Yuhao, who didn't react. She joked, "You're spouting so much nonsense. Are you sure he won't misunderstand you?" In Shrek Academy, Hui Yuhao was rather selective about the food he ate. While he was not picky, he had to admit that Juzi's culinary skills were decent. The meal helped the 3 of them to bond, and reduced the distance between the 3 new students. "So, I am right, right? Sister Juzi's food is indeed tasty. Let's see if you dare to offend us in the future. If not for Sister Juzi's kindness, we would not have given this meal to you," Cuckoo informed him. Hui Yuhao chuckled and said, "Sister Cuckoo, please don't keep thinking about that incident that day. Why don't you let me cook dinner instead? As a form of apology to you and Sister Juzi, you can cook." Juzi and Cuckoo asked simultaneously. While Juzi's face brimmed with curiosity, Cuckoo's face was full of doubt. Hui Yuhao smiled and said, "After I try, you'll know. When I first came to Shrek Academy, I survived by selling grilled fish. If I hadn't done that, how could an orphan like me afford the school fees?" When they heard the word orphan, the gazes of both girls turned soft. The change in Juzi's emotions was natural, but Cuckoo was better at concealing it. However, the change in her eyes could not escape Hui Yuhao's observation. They were indeed two kind seniors. Okay, you are in charge of dinner. However, to preserve their freshness, I did not bring much food. When we arrive at the Jingyang mountain range, we may have to make do with what we find there. The three of them continued on their journey. This was not Juzi and Cuckoo's first time going to the Jingyang mountain range. As they flew, Juzi told Huiyuhao about some of the do's and don'ts. The two girls were more surprised than Huiyuhao had expected. This made him feel slightly odd. Are there no twin-souled soul masters in the Sun Moon Empire? Juzi shook her head and said, no, I can be sure. In the history of the Sun Moon Empire, there has never been any twin-souled soul masters. Even in the Doluo continent, it is considered rare. Cuckoo was more excited as she said, tell us, what are the differences between your two souls? What are your martial souls? Huiyuhao was silent. Perhaps it was because he, Wang Dong and Xiao Xiao were all twin-souled soul masters, but he did not think much of his status as a twin-souled soul master. Furthermore, he was not born with a second soul. Instead, the Skydream Iceworm gave it to him. In the past few years, regardless of whether it was Skydream, the Ice Empress, or Electrolux, they had all been very quiet. Occasionally, when he reached a certain level of cultivation, they would release some of their sealed power for him. However, beyond that, they did not really have a huge impact on him. Instead, it appeared as if they wanted him to improve by himself. However, Huiyuhao was clear that the Ice Empress, Skydream, and Electrolux were his main sources of support and his true shield. They feared that he would become overdependent on them, and hence they rarely appeared. In the past 2 years, they had been happy with his progress. My main martial soul is a spiritual type, and my auxiliary martial soul is an ice type. I have rank 40 soul power. However, as I could not find an appropriate spiritual type soul beast, I have yet to add a soul ring. No wonder your 3 soul rings are so powerful. Juzi said in shock, not only do you have 2 martial souls, but your soul power is also at rank 40. A spiritual type martial soul, that's rare indeed. The school has been searching for a spiritual type soul master, though I do not know what for. Huiyuhao's heart missed a beat. He realized that it was the right choice to follow these 2 girls out. Perhaps teacher Xian would be more careful and prevent him from knowing too much about the inner workings of the Soul Moon Imperial Soul Engineering Academy, but Juzi and Cuckoo were much less guarded against him. Anything they said thoughtlessly would be helpful to him. So what are your soul skills? Especially the one that distorted the surrounding rays of light which stopped me from taking clear aim at you, Cuckoo asked curiously. Juzi frowned and said, Cuckoo. It was taboo to ask a soul master about his soul skills. Huiyuhao, however, answered nonchalantly, that's one of my auxiliary soul skills, called spiritual interference. Through my spiritual power, I used it to affect you. Anyone within the radius of my spiritual interference will have lowered accuracy. Only those whose spiritual power is superior to mine will be less affected. Cuckoo followed up with another question, so what's the radius of your spiritual interference? Huiyuhao smiled and did not reply. He could not answer that. This was his true secret. Juzi glared at Cuckoo, who stuck out her tongue and stopped asking. Evidently, she knew that she had gone overboard too. When the western skies turned into a beautiful dusk, they finally reached their destination. From far above in the sky, one could tell that the Jingyang mountain range resembled a huge spider, or an octopus, that lay splayed on the ground, majestic and awe-inspiring. While they were both gathering points for soul beasts, Huiyuhao sensed that it was different from the Great Star Doe Forest. The Great Star Doe Forest seemed endless. Here, however, one could sense a raw, fearsome smell. In terms of depth, it could not compare to the Great Star Doe Forest. However, it was clearly more aggressive. We shall rest nearby for the night, and tomorrow we will try the soul tool. At the same time, we will try our luck and see if we can find a suitable soul beast for you, Juzi said. Huiyuhao looked at Juzi. Her eyes were so warm and sweet. They also brimmed with longing and admiration for her father. This look shocked him greatly. In his memory, he never had a father. Grief now filled Juzi's eyes. Huge teardrops started to roll as she continued, War ruined my family. Father was forcibly conscripted, and he perished in the war against the Star Luo Empire. Mother was grief-stricken and fell deathly ill. 3 years later, she passed on too. Hence, like you, I am an orphan, too. An indescribable feeling engulfed Huiyuhao. Faced with this girl, who shared the same fate as him, he had a sudden desire to embrace her. She had lost her father and mother, and was an orphan just like him. No wonder she treated him differently after she found that he was an orphan, too. However, he did not know how to comfort Juzi. His heart was filled with an intense sorrow. He thought about his mother, who had raised him with much difficulty, and his father, whom he hated. At this moment, he was racked by emotions too. Cuckoo stood up and spoke in a loud voice, with her hands on her hips. "What are you guys doing? Don't be sad. All those things are in the past. The more you think about it, the sadder you will be. Look ahead, and don't wallow in your grief. There are many nicer things waiting for us, no?" Looking at her, the heavy atmosphere suddenly changed. Hou Yuhao and Juzi were both stunned. Then, they couldn't help but burst out laughing. Cuckoo was confused as she said, "Am I that funny? Sister Juzi, don't you find it embarrassing to be crying and laughing at the same time?" Juzi stood up and tugged her elbow. She said, "It's not early, let's rest. We need to be well rested should we wish to enter the mountains tomorrow." As she said that, she pulled Cuckoo toward her tent. After a few steps, she suddenly stopped and turned around to look at Hou Yuhao. She said, "In the future, you will be responsible for our meals." With that, she flashed him a smile. When he saw that smile, he felt that the tension between them had been reduced. The distance they kept from each other in school was gone. Her smile is beautiful indeed, Hou Yuhao thought. However, another figure filled his heart. He couldn't help but to mumble to himself, raiment of light, Wang Dong, that's truly. It was a quiet night. In the morning, when Juzi and Cuckoo woke up, Hou Yuhao had already made breakfast. Because of his dawn training, he would wake earlier than everyone else. Everyone present was a soul master, and they all felt rejuvenated after a good night's rest. Juzi was especially chirpy. Her smooth face had a tint of pink, making the desire to nibble on her almost irresistible. She was like a sweet and juicy peach. Hou Yuhao made a simple breakfast. Soup, roasted buns, and some simple meat. He had brought all the ingredients himself. However, despite their simplicity, Juzi's heart raced with every bite. She did not say it, but she had dreamt about her father last night. It was almost as if her father had coaxed her to sleep. While she did not train beforehand, it was one of the best nights of sleep she had ever had. Even Cuckoo felt that something was amiss about Juzi. Over breakfast, she stole 8 glances at Hou Yuhao. Every time she looked at him, her gaze would become warmer. It was as if she had found her soulmate. The inside of the all-terrain exploration soul tool was extremely simple, crude even. The 3 seats were simple and metallic, and they were secured in a small space within the ball. Also the seats had seatbelts. There was a metal stick in front of the first seat, but Hou Yuhao didn't know what it was for. When they entered, Hou Yuhao noticed a few windows. Other than the 4 main windows, the ball also had a crystal window directly above the seats, and one in the center that seemed to hold the 2 halves of the ball together. Before Cuckoo entered the ball, Juzi explained to Hou Yuhao, "Our all-terrain exploration soul tool's original objective was to transport and protect soul engineers. When soul engineers need to fight, they can be directly ejected from the seat. The crystal glass above will split in 2, and the person will launch out from the ball. Every seat has this function. To the right of your seat, there is a red button. If you hit it, you'll be ejected. Such a good design," Hou Yuhao said in admiration. Cuckoo had climbed in as well, and she sat next to Hou Yuhao. Juzi chose a function from the control stick and tugged it gently. Instantly, the window closed, and the 3 of them were sealed inside a 2-meter-wide ball. "Be careful, I'm going to start." As she said that, an orange-red layer of light shone from Juzi's body. 2 yellow and 3 purple soul rings appeared. With her left hand, she grabbed the thickest metal bar and injected her soul power into it. Instantly, the all-terrain exploration soul tool started to move. As its engines purred to life gently, the ball started to rise. Hou Yuhao activated his spiritual detection. He could sense that its 6 legs started to lift the ball up, allowing him to see through the windows clearly. "Cuckoo, you take charge of the soul barrier." As she said that, she pressed down on a button to her left. Then a metal stick appeared before Cuckoo as well, who grabbed it tightly and prepared to channel her soul power into it. "Let's go!" Juzi shouted excitedly. She pushed the metal bar in her left hand forward a little, and in turn, the 6 thick metal legs started to move forward slowly. The entire all-terrain exploration soul tool began vibrating. Hou Yuhao fully activated his spiritual detection. He could clearly sense that, all throughout the all-terrain exploration soul tool, at least 30 formation arrays were operating. The soul tool was completely propelled by Juzi's soul power. Hence, a great deal of her soul power was being siphoned, particularly when she first started the machine. When that happened, Juzi's face turned pale from the exertion. As its speed increased, Hui Yuhao took the time to quickly record the inner structure of this soul tool. The all-terrain exploration soul tool had too many formation arrays, and he could not remember all of them at present. But it was far more important for him to remember its structure instead, something which took the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineering Academy thousands of tests and trials to come up with. Inside the sealed ball, it was indeed uncomfortable. The main problem was its shakiness. While the all-terrain exploration soul tool was relatively shockproof, the path wasn't smooth at all. In the hard seat, the motions were extremely uncomfortable. After 15 minutes, Juzi had to stop to rest. At last, they had arrived at one of the outlying branches of the Jingyang mountain range. Moving forward, they would be climbing the mountains. Hui Yuhao made some quick calculations, and he realized that since the all-terrain exploration soul tool started operations, its speed was almost as fast as his highest running speed. Yuhao, share your feelings. Juzi, who was visibly pale, turned her head to look at Hui Yuhao. She'd switched positions with Cuckoo, who was piloting now. Hui Yuhao thought about it for a while and said, clumsy and lacking agility. I feel that what we see now is the result of its materials. For such a huge contraption, it's amazing enough that you can make it move at such high speeds just with your soul power. When compared to ordinary soul tools, which can only attack or only defend, it is already extremely complicated. I would say that it's a Class 8 soul tool in terms of complexity, but in terms of usefulness it's ordinary. Juzi nodded and said, that's right, it's still full of problems, and all we can do is continually improve it. With our current progress, it will be a while before we refine it any further. Right now, there are some people in the Empire who believe that we should devote more energy to the stationary soul tools. After all, they can already be operated by lower-level soul masters, and they have very powerful offensive abilities. Furthermore, the expenses put into the production of a soul tool like this are extreme. You don't know this, but even though this machine appears clumsy, every single one of its joints holds a different formation array. Several researchers have been involved in its creation, and many different materials have been tried. The workload is immense. I think it'll take a few thousand years to weaponize. Hui Yuhao flatly asked, Sister Juzi, do you think there was a point to doing such research? Juzi replied without missing a beat, of course there was a point. Research into soul machines will have a monumental impact on both our society and era. However, she frowned, then continued, looking at things right now, soul machines seem to be too advanced, which is why continuing to research them has become so hard. If we spent more time on fundamental research, soul machines would surely become a thing of the future. In my opinion, we need to focus on researching a replacement for soul power. If we don't, only soul masters will be able to use this sort of soul tool. This massive limitation will surely affect the development of soul tools. Hui Yuhao hadn't expected Juzi to be so open about it. With respect in his heart, he gently nodded, but chose not to express his own opinion. Why haven't you said anything? Is it because you're afraid that we'll use it to attack your country? Juzi seemed to understand what Hui Yuhao was thinking. Hui Yuhao didn't try to hide his thoughts. He nodded again and then said, many technological advancements are made to fuel the war engine. Once war breaks out, civilians are the ones who suffer the most. Right as Hui Yuhao was exploring the magical effects of the vehicle, his spiritual detection sent him a warning. The all-terrain exploration vehicle suddenly stopped, and its 6 mechanical legs descended into a half-squatting stance. Hui Yuhao then scanned one direction in particular with his spiritual detection. A 2-meter-tall, wolf-like soul beast appeared and gazed at the all-terrain exploration vehicle warily. It then let out a deep hooting sound, as if it were trying to demonstrate its might. It was Hui Yuhao's first time seeing this wolf. It was silvery white, while its fur appeared metallic. An intense radiance was reflected off of it, which made it seem as if it were glowing under the sun. Hui Yuhao couldn't tell what the soul beast's cultivation was from its appearance. It's a rare soul beast, a silver wolf. Based on its size, it should have a cultivation of around 3,000 years. Yuhao, beware. Hui Yuhao nodded, then asked, what kind of soul beast is this silver wolf? How come I'm not familiar with it? Juzi replied, the silver wolf is a special soul beast in the Sun Moon Empire. It's a metal element soul beast, but it's not any ordinary soul beast. It's very difficult to deal with, and it feeds on mithril. The silver wolf needs to consume massive amounts of mithril to break through its own bottleneck like humans need a soul ring when they reach a bottleneck. There's a rumor that a silver wolf king appeared in the past with cultivation of 10,000 years. It managed to resist 2 Sol Doluor before escaping with injuries. A silver wolf emperor with 100,000-year cultivation and above has never appeared before. A silver wolf's fur and bones are extremely useful materials for making soul tools with, while their meat is quite delicious and can strengthen the body of a soul master. Cuckoo eagerly said, "Let me go out. I have a way to deal with it." Huayuhao said, "Let me go instead. Be careful." The silver wolf had already launched an attack while they were speaking. It was evidently unhappy with the metal ball in front of it, as its silver fur started to shine, and it spat out a silver ball of light towards it. The silver ball of light didn't make any sound as it shot through the air. However, the silver light transformed the moment it neared the all-terrain exploration vehicle. It became a diameter-wide fireball, then sped towards the all-terrain exploration vehicle. The silver wolf couldn't overcome the Class 5 soul tool barrier easily. It was even shocked as Huayuhao suddenly appeared. As the silver wolf lifted its head, it spat out a silver ball of light. It was yet another wind-type attack. Many wind blades covered the entire area, and Huayuhao couldn't possibly dodge. Diamond ice crystals appeared and shone extremely brightly under the sun. They were even more dazzling than the silver light on the silver wolf's body. The wind blades couldn't penetrate Huayuhao's Ice Empress armor. 6 metal barrels appeared on Huayuhao's body at this point, and were fired in the direction of the silver wolf. 6 streaks of light instantly shot out. The silver wolf was extremely quick, and spat out a few more silver light balls as it leapt backwards. They formed layers of water curtains in the air, which weakened the soul rays. By the time the soul rays reached it, it managed to dodge them easily. Huayuhao landed on the ground following this strike and started to lope towards the silver wolf like a panther. The silver wolf was evidently more adept at long-range attacks. As it retreated, it continued to spit out balls of silver light towards Huayuhao. However, Huayuhao had a deeper understanding of the silver wolf after Juzi and Cuckoo introduced it to him. The element contained within the silver wolf's silver light balls couldn't be concealed from him. He used his spiritual detection to detect it. 3 white soul rings rose from Huayuhao's legs and started to shine brightly. The 2 ladies who were watching him were shocked. What was happening? Huayuhao didn't dare to reveal too many of his abilities since Juzi had threatened him. Right now, he was using all 3 of his soul skills at the same time. A purplish golden radiance flashed across his eyes before disappearing. The silver wolf screamed pathetically before falling into convulsions on the ground. It writhed around in pain for a few seconds before staggering back to its feet. However, it didn't appear to be clear-headed anymore. Mass enfeeblement and spiritual interference had struck it at the same time. Huayuhao was the one most surprised at this point. He thought that the silver wolf was merely a few thousand years old, and thus its spiritual power should be inferior to him by a lot. Even if it didn't die from his spiritual shock, it should be almost half dead. However, it was able to crawl up. This was beyond what Huayuhao had expected. Was this silver wolf a spiritual-type soul beast? However, it only had 3,000 years of cultivation. It wasn't suitable enough for him. He did not slow down even though he was thinking in his head. When the spiritual shock was unleashed, he had already charged forward. The intense radiance from a Class 5 soul thruster lit up behind his back. He increased his speed to the limit instantly and reached the silver wolf just as it stood up. He struck with his right hand. The purplish golden radiance flashed from Huayuhao's eyes again. He didn't give the silver wolf any chance to catch its breath. He unleashed the spiritual shock once again, causing the silver wolf's 7 apertures to spurt blood. His dark golden terror claws stabbed into the back of the silver wolf's neck and tore into its central nerves. The entire fighting process was very simple. The 3,000-year-old silver wolf was repressed so heavily by Huayuhao that it couldn't resist at all. Juzi looked at the wide-eyed Cuckoo with an amused expression. "Do you still think we can beat him in the wild?" Cuckoo muttered, "He's too scary when he engages in close combat. That's a 3,000-year silver wolf." However, it was completely helpless against him. Since when did a silver wolf become so weak? I've heard that such soul beasts are very strong. This soul beast is supposed to be a mix of elements that doesn't possess all the elemental powers. That is not possible for a soul beast. It's only tapping into its affinity with the various elements and its own immense spiritual power to control the elemental powers. The metal that it consumes is probably only effective in increasing its affinity toward the different elements. Otherwise, it would be able to exhibit more than just the basic elemental powers. Yes, you can adopt it as your fourth soul ring. However, this silver wolf is too weak, and isn't suitable for you. I didn't expect to see such a fun soul beast. If you meet another one of the same species with a cultivation of at least 10,000 years, you must not let it go. I believe that its soul skill should be rather good. Although it may not be an offensive type soul skill, it can enhance your overall abilities, as well as your mass enfeeblement. Alright, thanks. Hui Hao put the silver wolf's corpse away in his storage type soul tool before re-entering the all-terrain exploration soul tool. Juzi gave him a thumbs up as a compliment. Hui Hao only smiled and asked, "How do you plan to deal with this silver wolf?" Juzi said, "If you're willing to sell it, I can help you. It should fetch a good price. You can keep it for now, the silver wolf's fur will prevent its corpse from rotting. We'll deal with it once we return to the academy. I believe that the silver wolf isn't a spiritual type soul beast, but its spiritual powers should be quite strong. Otherwise, it shouldn't be able to control the elements to attack. Aren't you going to try it? Also, why did your soul rings turn white just now?" Hui Hao shook his head slightly and said, "It's not what I want yet. As for the color of my soul rings, can't I have 3 10-year soul rings?" As he spoke, he also laughed. This was an answer that no one would believe. Juzi pursed her lips. She had already returned to her gentle persona and managed to conceal her thoughts well. Hui Hao pondered for a moment and said, "Wolves are usually very sensitive in terms of their sense of smell. Does this silver wolf also have such a characteristic?" Juzi thought for a moment before replying, "It should. After all, it's a wolf." Hui Hao said, "Seniors, I may have to separate from the two of you for some time." Juzi was stunned. "Where are you going?" Hui Hao replied, "I'm going to find a suitable soul beast. This silver wolf is indeed suitable for me, but its cultivation is too low. It's too easy for me to fuse with it. That's why I'm going to find a stronger silver wolf, or some other spiritual type soul beast. It should be a dangerous journey. That's why it's better for me to work alone. Continue with your experiments. I will meet the both of you back at the place we camped last night. If I'm not back in half a month's time, the two of you must return first. No, how can we leave you alone?" Cuckoo asserted righteously. "We have to go together. Don't forget that we're soul kings. 3 is always better than 1 in terms of safety. Although your close combat skills are outstanding, our soul tools are rather powerful too. Our survival skills are equally as good as yours." Hui Hao was stunned. He didn't expect that this young lady who continuously clashed with him was actually offering help to him at this critical moment. Hui Hao could see the sincerity in her eyes. Hui Hao didn't mind set up a fire in the Jingyang mountain range. Lunch was yet another feast. However, it was different from the grilling the night before. He made soup this time using silver wolf meat. The silver wolf's bones and fur were preserved, and its blood was smeared on the all-terrain exploration vehicle. Its meat became their delicacy. Hui Hao only decided on his cooking style after examining the quality of the silver wolf's meat. The silver wolf's meat was quite tough, not tender enough for grilling, which would make it difficult to chew. After a period of cooking, it would taste nicer when it was softer. He indeed had the sense of a father, just like Juzi had said. His delicious meat soup left Juzi and Cuckoo pleased. They revealed a greater trust and reliance on Hui Hao in their eyes. "Hui Hao, I'm going to stick to you from today onwards. As long as you're in the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineering Academy, you have to cook for me," Cuckoo exclaimed. Juzi teased, "You made him your chef, but what are you going to offer? Your body?" Cuckoo's face turned red. However, she threw a threatening look at Hui Hao and said, "Do you dare to demand anything from me?" "No, I don't," Hui Hao answered smoothly. Cuckoo wanted to scare him, but she didn't expect him to answer so readily. She said dismally, "I'm smart, intelligent, and cute. What expression is this? Why don't you dare to make a demand?" Hui Hao chortled and answered, "Even if I said I wanted something, you wouldn't budge. I'm only saying what you want to hear. I'm really maligned. Do you want me to beg you to be my girlfriend before you'll dump me to one side?" Cuckoo nodded her head forcefully and said, "That should be the case. However, I may give you a chance if you continue your cooking. It's a pity you're a little young. Tell me, how old are you?" Hui Hao smiled and said, 14, going on 15. Silence. Turned heads. Eye contact. After lunch, the 3 of them took a short break. They only continued after their soul power was restored to their peak levels. Hu Hao remained seated in the main control pod. Before he moved off, he turned to the two ladies and said, "I've already smeared the Silver Wolf's blood on the all-terrain exploration vehicle. It's too late for regrets now." Cuckoo snapped, "Enough with the crap. Let's go." After all, the Silver Wolf's scent could only spread outwards a certain distance, and shouldn't be able to reach all the way to the core of the mountain range. The Silver Wolf's profuse bleeding hadn't caused any trouble for them, or at least not yet. Most soul beasts would flee after detecting the scent of the Silver Wolf's blood. This was very evident when Hu Hao used his spiritual detection. He discovered that even some of the 1,000-year soul beasts would escape after catching a whiff of the Silver Wolf's blood. Just like this, they were advancing faster and faster along the path. Hu Hao quickly controlled the all-terrain exploration vehicle to ascend a nearby mountain peak within the outer boundaries of the Jingyang mountain range. He didn't dare expend too much of his soul power as they ventured into the habitats of these soul beasts. After restoring part of his abilities from the mountain peak, he looked into the distance. Like most mountain ranges, the Jingyang mountain range's mountain peaks were higher the closer to the center you got. However, not all of them were steep inclines, and there were some with quite gentle inclines. The quantity of soul beasts near the main trail was much greater. They were easily comparable to the soul beasts at the edge of the Great Star Doe Forest. However, they didn't reveal themselves because of the Silver Wolf's blood. Hu Hao sat cross-legged on the ground and allowed the wind to blow against him softly. He wasn't being adventurous when he leaned on the all-terrain exploration vehicle. The two ladies couldn't see his face. A streak of golden light flashed across his forehead, and the Eye of Destiny quietly opened. Hu Hao's spiritual world had experienced earth-shaking changes after he had received the Eye of Destiny. Neither the Skydream Iceworm, the Ice Empress, nor Electrolux could control his body anymore because of the Eye of Destiny, unless he allowed it. Even so, he could instantly regain control of his own body with his will even if he invited them to control his body. Him using the Eye of Destiny right now wasn't to enhance his spirit eye's visual acuity. When he opened them, the aura of destiny appeared in Hu Hao's mind. His sensitivity also increased greatly, allowing him to predict the future to a certain extent and be warned of trouble or anything good that was about to happen. Oh? The Eye of Destiny shut. But even when Hu Hao opened his normal eyes, he was shocked. He didn't expect to come across something like this when he used the Eye of Destiny to search for the paths of destiny. Danger. Opportunity. It was a little unclear, but he could definitely sense the presence of both danger and opportunity. This was new, surprising him. What was going on? Hu Hao tensed up. Although the Eye of Destiny only gave unclear answers, he did sense that the dangers came before the opportunities. It seemed as if some countless dangers were waiting for him in the mountains far away. This was a very ominous sign. However, he wouldn't back off when he was already here. Moreover, the Eye of Destiny didn't give him any sense of fatal danger. Proceed with caution. Hu Hao set himself this careful strategy. Before Hu Hao cut the fresh tiger meat into pieces, he had already prepared a condiment. It was a new slightly spicy sauce, but it was very refreshing. After the tiger's meat was marinated, it became very tender. Not only did the sour and fishy taste disappear, somehow it developed a wild taste. However, Hu Hao didn't let them eat too much of it. He knew it wasn't easy to digest raw tiger meat even though it's very nutritious. He came up with another sauce and used it to make a salad. He added some dried foods to the salad, which tasted pretty addictive themselves. Cuckoo and Juzi discovered that their sisterly affections for Hu Hao increased every time they tasted his cooking. What will we do at night? After having dinner, the three of them formed a circle. The mountain breeze was chilly at night, and gusts of mist floated by, causing their outerwear to be wet. However, it wasn't a good idea to pitch a tent here, because they might meet a soul beast anytime. Hu Hao pointed at the metal ball behind him and said, "We can only sleep in it. The two of you can rest. I'll stand guard outside. If there's any movement, I'll inform you immediately." Juzi said, "Let me relieve you at midnight." Cuckoo added, "Let's make it 4 hours per person." Hu Hao smiled and replied, "All right, don't worry and go to sleep. I'll call for you when your time comes." The ladies returned to the all-terrain exploration vehicle and shut the crystal door, completely isolating themselves from the chill outside. "What did you discover?" Juzi opened a glass window and asked softly. As she spoke, some metal clanging sounds could already be heard from her and Cuckoo's body. They were preparing their offensive soul tools for battle. Hu Hao shook his head slightly and said, "I'm still unsure. But I'm far more sensitive than most people. I believe that a huge problem is coming. Hui Yuhao took a deep breath and tried to calm himself down. Although he had made significant improvements over the last 2 years, he was still only at rank 40 at the moment. He couldn't compare with truly powerful figures. His spiritual detection changed from an radial detection to a one-directional detection as Hui Yuhao scanned his surroundings. The one-directional detection could stretch out to a kilometer if he didn't use the Eye of Destiny. This wasn't the time to conserve soul power, so he initiated his spiritual detection to the fullest and scanned downslope. The 2 windows of the all-terrain exploration vehicle were open, 2 black cannons poking out from them. Each cannon's caliber was greater than 100 millimeters, both operated by Cuckoo, who was carrying a cannon on each shoulder. Juzi sat in the main control pod, ready to move the all-terrain exploration vehicle at a moment's notice. Hui Yuhao didn't unleash any soul tools, but he watched his surroundings very sharply. When his entire body made a full revolution, his expression was extremely dismal before he finished. Silent figures were already gathering towards the top of the mountain from all directions. They didn't make a sound, but the invisible threats clenched at Hui Yuhao's heart, a pack of wolves. It's a pack of golden wolves. We're surrounded. There are at least 3 10,000-year golden wolves leading more than 100-year to 1,000-year wolves. They'll be here in less than 3 minutes. Be prepared to escape. I believe they won't be able to resist the all-terrain exploration vehicle if it rolls over them. Juzi and Cuckoo were stunned. These golden wolves were in fact metal-type wolves. They were actually soul beasts under the metal element. Although they weren't as powerful as the golden lion, tiger, panther, or bear metal-type soul beasts, they were much quicker, and they moved in packs. In the Jingyang mountain range, all metal-type soul beasts show more ability in fighting than the other soul beasts by at least 30%. In addition, there were even 3 10,000-year soul beasts leading this pack. This spelled trouble. Even if Hui Yuhao and the girls couldn't be killed so easily, their energy would be depleted rapidly. Yuhao, get in. Let's roll them down together. Juzi called anxiously. The crossbows on Hui Yuhao's body were completely charged beforehand. They had to be recharged once every 3 days. Hui Yuhao had already prepared them long before he'd entered the Jingyang mountain range. This golden wolf became the first victim of his Sugar Divine crossbow. Hui Yuhao reached out with his left hand and grabbed the golden wolf's corpse. He sealed its wounds with ice and then threw the corpse to one side with a flick of his wrist as he opted not to use the ice explosion technique on its body. The Sugar Divine crossbows he was currently using were different from the ones that he'd created in front of Shenzhen. They were made from better materials and more meticulous craftsmanship. They could be fired 3 times and were top-grade Class 5 soul tools. This meant that the 18 slots in the Sugar Divine crossbow could fire 54 times in total, which was the reason that Hui Yuhao was so confident. It's pertinent to note that the Sugar Divine crossbow could also be fired extremely easily. He only needed to use a tinge of his soul power to initiate the cumulative formation arrays within them. The rest of the firing mechanism was completed by the soul tool itself, the end result being that the charged power would fire the arrows. Their destructive ability was also extremely great. Part 1 ends here.